Welcome to a special Thursday Grid Live pre-race, the Duel at Daytona. Hello everyone, I'm Joe Santiago, and with me we have Jackson Todd from 36xracing.com, Tanner Smith from pitboxpress.com. A lot to talk about with the duels at Daytona. A big thank you to our Patreon investors, Colin, Michelle, Mark, Rob, David, and Matthew. Link in the video description to invest in the Grid Network each and every month. You can also do a one-time investment through Buy Me a Coffee, YouTube Super Chat, anything that will help us get to the track, to the speedway, and of course expand our coverage and encourage everyone in the chat room. Dylan's in, Big Yo, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to comment everyone later on with pick a winner with your picks for the duel races. Let's jump right into it with the duels, which will of course be setting the field for the Daytona 500. That'll be tonight. The rain has stopped. Track drying is underway, so potentially the race could still get started on time, but we'll just see how the weather will play out. The front row is set, though, for the Daytona 500, and for the first time, a Toyota is leading the field to the green flag on Sunday for the Great American Race. Chase Briscoe was the fastest yesterday, but now we're racing today. Under conditions most likely we won't see at the Daytona 500, a car that was fast for qualifying could not exactly be the greatest car for racing under race conditions with the big pack. Jackson, starting with you, do you anticipate Briscoe to stay up front, or will he fall towards the back?
Well, first I want to say it's great to be back for another season. I'm excited to get going this year. But yeah, I think Briscoe, there's points on the line in the duels now, right? That didn't used to be that way. And although obviously you don't want to wreck your Daytona 500 car, there is still something for Briscoe to go after, even though he's locked into the pole. So I think as long as things are calm, that's a big ask here at a drafting race. But I think as long as things are calm, Briscoe can stay near the front. Sure, hang out the front. Maybe if it gets towards the end of the race and the middle of the pack's a little crazy, then I'd bail. But there's still points to race for tonight.
Yeah, I kind of align with Jackson that, yes, there are points to go for tonight, but at the same time, you don't really want to tear up what is obviously a very fast race car. If I were starting from the pole in one of these duels, my strategy would be to stay up at the front as long as I could within reason, just to see how my car handles out front in the pack. And, if the line abandons me at some point, obviously I'll just fall to the back because it doesn't really affect me too much. If I had to make a prediction on how he'll do tonight, he probably finishes somewhere in the 6th to 7th range. Like I said, I don't think he'll take too many risks, and traditionally the first duel isn't the craziest one. It's usually the second one. So we'll just have to see, but I would suspect that if a car is that strong on its own, it's got to be fast in the draft, but again, we'll have to see.
A great point, especially how that first duel tends to be a little bit more calmer. Of course, one of the things this year, we do have cars trying to race their way in. They are under yellow. Of course, Truex Jr. Johnson locked in on speed. We'll talk more about them later on. Outside the front row for the Daytona 500 will be Austin Cindric. And then you have essentially what we saw from qualifying, Priest, Logano, and Berry, all Fords, super fast last night. Tanner, starting with you. Are you sensing Ford might have the best car overall from what we saw yesterday in practice and qualifying?
Absolutely. And it's just continuing a trend that we saw last year. I mean, what was it? Michael McDowell had 5 poles last year for front row, and most of them came on super speedways. Not only that, Joey Logano set the pole last year for the 500. So obviously Ford had a very strong super speedway car to start last season. And I just don't see that slowing down any this year. Obviously McDowell and Travis Peterson departing front row to go over to Chevy and Spire may have some sort of an effect on, everybody at Ford's qualifying, but clearly it didn't seem that it was that much of a loss, considering front row still had some pretty strong efforts from Zane Smith and Todd Gilliland. So I would definitely say that Ford's got the strongest super speedway car this year. It continues a trend from last year.
Yeah, it's kind of continuing what we've seen here the last few years of these Fords really showing up really fast in the super speedway qualifying. And we're about to get into it, but I think it was emphasized further this year by the Hendrick cars not being up in that lead group. But yeah, I mean, everything Tanner said, definitely like big exclamation point on all that. The no McDowell is kind of interesting. I mean, I guess we'll see throughout the year how that continues for front row. And as we get to non-Daytona 500 drafting qualifying, yeah, impressed with Briscoe, and then the Fords continuing what they've been doing the last few years.
Yeah, the Fords, they're looking really good again speed wise, getting up there towards the front and getting the win. Sounds easier, but we saw last year William Byron won the Daytona 500 from 18th place. Hendrick Motorsports, yesterday in qualifying, only had one car in the top 10, Kyle Larson. Now, that's the second consecutive year we're not going to see a Hendrick Motorsports driver in the front row. But as I said, Jackson, we've seen them win from outside that front row. So going forward today, do you anticipate those four cars of Hendrick Motorsports working their way towards the front?
Short answer, yes. They're split 2 and 2 in the duel, so there won't be like a super row of like four Hendrick cars flying forward. But Hendrick has their roster has kind of slowly been getting better at these drafting races. Like William Byron has been like pretty good at it for most of his Cup tenure, but as a team, I feel like they're really elevating on these tracks. Obviously, last year the Daytona 500 top two spots is an example of that. But even like Kyle Larson, who I feel like it was almost like a punchline with him. We get to these super speedways, and then Larson finds a way to throw it away. But all of them have really been getting better on these drafting tracks. So yes, I would expect the Hendrick cars to move forward both tonight and on Sunday.
I don't know if I agree. I distinctly remember the last time that we were at Daytona that Kyle Larson found himself in the middle of 3 or 4 different accidents. So I don't know if he's necessarily gotten better. Like, obviously, he dodged that massive wreck at Talladega and finally got a top 5 at a plate race. So that was nice to see for him. But, I mean, even going back to last year's 500, Byron wrecked in his dual race and kind of triggered that accident and then triggered the big one in the big race. And granted, he made it out of that one and got the benefit of it, but that kind of luck isn't going to last forever. I do think that in these duels, the Chevys are definitely going to link up, and the Hendrick cars do work well together. It's just that they've got to keep the car under control a little bit better than they do it oftentimes. So the only one that I would consider an elite plate racer out of all of the 4 is probably Chase Elliott, because he tends to mind his P's and Q's, keep to himself and just try to keep his car under control and survive those races until the end, which I think is a good strategy. So I would imagine he will probably do well come Sunday, but I think tonight we'll see the Chevys really link together in that one duel where they have like 14 cars or something like that. But outside of that, I don't really have a whole lot of confidence in Hendrick's plate program, considering how little speed they showed last night.
Last night, their speed was just not there. One driver that has some speed in the chat room, John talking about Ty Dillon. Of course, Ty Dillon, great effort. He's joined Colleague Racing this year. And of course, that dual race, you got Ty Dillon, and as you mentioned, Tanner, 14 Chevrolets. That only leaves 4 Fords, 5 Toyotas making the remainder of the field. Now, Talladega, Daytona, we've seen the last few years the manufacturers working together. We want all the Chevys to pit at this time. We want them to all to draft, not help each other, not help out the other 4 Toyotas. I got to ask you, Tanner, could Chevrolet working together just make it where with this first race, which tends to sometimes be more calm, just a little bit more harder for the Toyotas and Ford to overcome? Or do you think Toyota Ford can bring that fight to Chevrolet despite not having the advantage of all the cars?
I think Duel 1 will be very, very cut and dry. I think the Chevys will pretty much try to line up, and when you have a 14-8 advantage, or 14-9, sorry. 14-9 advantage, it's going to make it rather difficult for any of the Fords and Toyotas to really have the actual manpower to link up and compete with the Chevrolets. I do think that it's important to note for the big race that Toyota did get both of their open cars into this. So they will have 11 entries in the Daytona 500, which is a drastic departure from the 4 that they had in 2020. So I expect Toyota and Ford in the big race to be able to work together and, really make some noise. But as far as tonight, especially in Duel 1, I don't really have a whole lot of confidence in them, unfortunately.
I think I'm going to go the other direction with this, and I'm going to say that there are so many Chevys in Duel number 1 that it's going to kind of negate any advantage they have with the majority. Because the difference between finishing 14th and first in the Duel, that starting position for the 500, that can really change the kind of the structure of your race really quickly. So I think there's going to be so many Chevys in that race that it's going to kind of break down a little bit. It might look a little bit more traditional less team impact, super speedway racing. But in Duel 2, that's where I think there would be more of a clear, pack by pack, here are the Fords, here are the Toyotas, and that's what they're working together. But I think Duel 1, since there's just so many Chevys, I think it kind of breaks that structure apart a little bit.
That'll be very interesting to see how that happens with the first duel, because you have a good point, especially a driver like Ty Dillon does not want to just be pushing other Chevrolets to the front. If they're going to finish 10th, that's 10 rows back. Very interesting to see how that first duel is going to play out with all those Chevrolets. The second duel, a bit more distributed when it comes to all the manufacturers. But one thing that stands out, you have all 3 Team Penske Fords, plus Josh Berry, Wood Brothers, that technical alliance. They looked fast last night. And 2 of the experienced Roush Fenway Keselowski drivers, so Brad Keselowski, Chris Buescher. 6 of those drivers are all really good. And 5 of them have won on super speedways. Overall, Jackson, do you see those 5 being the heavy favorites for tonight? Or are there other drivers in that second duel that you could feel ruined the Ford party?
Yeah, I think the members of the Ford party in race number 2 is what really amplifies that group. I know I just said it's going to be an even split, but as we sit here and go down that list of Fords, I think it's going to be a Ford-dominated Duel number 2. I think, just if I'm going to draft a roster of plate racers, it's that group of Fords right there.
Yeah, I mean, Team Penske has their entire roster in there, obviously, save for Wood Brothers, Josh Berry being in the first duel. But outside of that, I kind of feel like it's going to be chalk, and I think that there could be a wreck in the second duel that happens closer into the middle of the field that kind of takes out some of the lesser quick cars. So I don't really have a whole lot of aspersions as to how well that contingent of Fords is going to link up in that second duel. They have a very defined history of working well together, and obviously they'll have their mishaps like last year at Talladega where the Fords kind of took each other in the field out, but I feel like that happens way less often than you find them at the front and they end up winning. So I'm definitely going with the Fords.
I think it's going to be a Ford as well. The question is which one. I'm leaning towards Blaney. He knows how to get the job done in Talladega. It's a matter of getting it done for the big one, the Daytona 500. In the chat room, Dillon brothers, both in the top 6 of the 500. Bit of a bold prediction. I think Austin Dillon, he's shown he's good at the super speedway. He just needs a little bit of luck, good, clean race, and then Ty Dillon could just have a clean, solid race. That'll be huge for college racing after not so great 2024. And then, John, what drivers do you think will miss the show? I know we'll talk a little bit about this later on with who we think is going to miss the show, but I'll start with you. Jackson, when it comes to missing the show, is there one driver that you feel like if they get in, it's like, wow, that's a big surprise because you anticipate they'll be out?
I mean, I feel like that group of I feel bad even saying this, but like the BJ McLeod, the JJ Yaley, the Corey LaJoy, I feel like that's kind of the like easy group to ditch. We're gonna maybe get into a little bit more later, but I think just Anthony Alfredo and Justin Allgaier. I mean, I guess it's kind of maybe not a good point, Corey LaJoy, but just the drafting experience, just like how active they are, kind of just in the flow of the race. I think that's like a really big asset in this race when you don't have like a lot of on track practice time. I just feel like they will be able to excel in that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that with Allgaier having some experience in this race, not necessarily the duels, but the big race, I think that he definitely has a bit of an upper hand over someone like Chandler Smith, who unfortunately is not in the greatest equipment, which is no disrespect to MBM slash, I want to say they're Garage 66 now or something like that. I can't remember. But I would be very surprised if that car was able to make it in. With all due respect, JJ Yaley, I could say the same. If I had to make a pick, Allgaier is probably for sure going to log himself into the field. And out of the second duel, I don't know. Like, not. I would say probably Corey makes it, but I mean, Alfredo has some experience in these races, and we obviously saw the 62 car can compete at Daytona when, Parker Retzloff contended for the win last summer. So I would probably lean towards Alfredo over LaJoy. I think Corey might unfortunately be a cause of an accident tonight, but we'll have to see.
Corey LaJoy, I got a feeling, like you said, sort of that cause of an accident. I think he's going to miss the show because of that if he's out of it. And then, really, I think in the other one, if it's more calm, BJ McLeod, JJ Yeley, whichever one has that worst race, I think will be the easy out. It'll be interesting to see how the racing will pan out. Now, of course, one driver in that first duel that's in an open car but locked in, Helio Castroneves in the Daytona 500, regardless of what happened, he has that special provisional for him. So he did not have a good qualifying lap yesterday. So while several drivers are trying to race their way in, Castroneves, really, he could almost just doesn't have to worry about that. He is in the race. Take care of your car. Tanner, how does he approach tonight's race? Do you think he'll be racing as if he's trying to get in, improve his start position, or just mainly gain notes and experience? If you were his crew chief, how would you advise the Helio Castroneves, one of the best in the Indy 500 of all time?
Yes, so just making sure that I have this right, he would have been 39th on speed last night. Would that be correct, based on him being 20th in Duel 1? If it were me, I would be advising him to go as hard as he can, because while it doesn't matter if he's going to make the show, you also have to consider it doesn't matter if he wrecks either. I would assume, and obviously I know the old saying about assume, but I would assume that they have a backup car there. And when you qualify 39th on speed, I can't imagine your backup car can't be much worse than that. So if it were me, this guy has not had any stock car experience at speed with other cars on the track. He needs to go out there and he needs to prove why he's won 4 Indy 500s and show these guys what he's got. And I think the best way to do that is by kind of setting the tone in the duels that you are somebody that can carry speed, has done the sim work to know what they're doing, and can compete at the end of the day. So if it were me, I would be encouraging him to, find out what the car can and can't do, find out what he's comfortable with, where they need to fix the car to make it go faster for him. Those are the things I would be focusing on. I think making him just log laps out there is not only cruel, but very senseless.
Yeah, my notes for Elliot says race tonight and learn. There's no use in him just riding around. And I think Tanner made a good point. If it's a 39th place car, like, would you really be getting rid of much anyway? But yeah, I mean, like, you don't want to fall back on this 41st position like that. There's not a lot of pride being stuck with that title of, oh, and yeah, we're also just letting him in. He obviously wants to race his way in. He wants to learn. He has, I mean, essentially no experience in what this is going to be. So I don't know if he needs to, like, make irresponsible moves, but yes, go out there and race and learn. Try to negate the need for this 41st spot and just prove you can make the show, learn, and then, yeah, I mean, you're Helio Castroneves. Like, do it.
That's a great point, because I was thinking the conservative route, but you both sold me that just go out there, because it is true. 39th place, if you wreck that car, your backup car cannot be that much worse.
Yeah. I mean, obviously it would be expressing concern for, like, the Trackhouse cars, right? Like, I mean, he is in, let me confirm before I say this, if he's in Duel 1.
He is.
Yeah, and then, yes, he's in Duel 1. And you end up in a scenario where, like, oh, well, then Chastain and Suarez also have junked cars. And then you're kind of, they obviously need correct cars prepared. And if that limits their resources, that would obviously be a situation. So you shouldn't try to wreck the 39th place car, but that like risk meter has been knocked down a few notches.
And don't forget Shane Van Gisbergen too. That's another driver that first time doing this. I know a lot of folks think highly of Shane Van Gisbergen. He has a super speedway racing experience. I think he could be one that might get caught up in trouble, just wrong place, wrong time in these dual races, because there's just such a different beast compared to a long Xfinity Series race or a longer 500-mile race like Talladega. Now, two drivers in open cars, and they raced their way in based off speed from yesterday's qualifying. Jimmy Johnson, Martin Truex Jr., two more Toyotas. How hard is those drivers? I mean, we talked about if Castroneves, nothing with that car, could just go learn. For these two, how did they race? Did they work with the Toyotas to try to get more Toyotas up towards the front? Or did they focus on their cars to try to make it as good as possible? Jackson, starting with you.
Yeah, I think, an obvious note off the bat is Jimmy will be in Duel 2, which includes the other two Legacy Motor Club cars, which he, in this offseason, took a larger ownership stake in. So he will have a specific interest in Duel number 2. For Truex, I think it's just, for him, it really is don't take risks. Don't tear up this 500 car. I'm sure he's being encouraged to help his Toyota teammates, and I'm sure he'd, like to keep those relationships positive. But certainly, no need for Truex to be taking any risks. It's about just getting himself a good starting position for the 500, because he could win that, and that'd be a really cool story for him.
Yeah, as far as Truex is concerned, I think that it would probably behoove him to just keep his car clean, more or less. He's unfortunately trapped in the duel with all of those Chevys, so that presents a bit of an issue, but he is immediately surrounded by Gibbs, Reddick, Wallace. I mean, those are three other Toyotas right there. Plus, he'll also have Briscoe in that race, so that'll be somewhat helpful. As for Jimmy, I kind of lean towards where Jackson's going, that with Legacy Motor Club's cars taking up 3 slots in that race, I would imagine that Jimmy is going to do what he can to not only improve his starting spot, but the spots of his drivers as well. I still think Jimmy Johnson has that dog in him. I said that on our preseason predictions video, so it was nice to kind of be reinforced on that opinion by him going out there and putting himself in the race without having Thursday be full of fits.
going to be really interesting to see all that happens with Jimmy Johnson. I mean, I feel he is overdue for some good luck. If he could get a good run and get his other two drivers up towards the front, that'll just be a positive start for that team, Legacy Motor Club, because last year, one to forget about it. Now, second year Toyota, it'll be really interesting to see what happens. Of course, 45 drivers, 36 are in by the charters. We mentioned the 2 in by speed. 2 more will be racing their way in. The scenario is this, though, as we talked a little bit about Helio Castroneves. If he does not race his way in, he'll be that 31st position. Now, 4 drivers will go home, maybe 5, if Helio gets in, depending on how he gets in. But the drivers that are on the hot seat, I would say Justin Allgaier, that beautiful number 40 Chevrolet for Dale Earnhardt Jr. First time, you know that team really wants to get in. Corey LaJoie, motivated, lost his full-time ride, will just love to get in the Great American Race. I know there's probably some people that prefer him to race Xfinity where there's fewer people in the stands, but there'll definitely be more than 12 folks in the stands at Daytona. Then Anthony Alfredo, that 62 Beard Motorsport, he has shown what he could do. He's going to run to try to get back in there. That team was, 1 or 2 full-time employees, and that was it? So that's a big thing. BJ McLeod, hey, anytime you could get into the Daytona 500 for a small operation like him, sold a charter, just get that little bit more, keep racing as a hobby. And JJ Yale, New York Racing, that team has really plummeted from the hype of when it came in to where it is now. I know we talked about drivers that we felt were automatically they're out. Tanner, starting with you, which 2 drivers do you think could race their way into the Daytona 500 to join Johnson, Truex, and Castroneves, depending on how he does tonight?
I think it's a virtual impossibility that Justin Allgaier misses this race. Something would have to go tremendously wrong. He is in the duel with all those Chevys in there. He has a solid car, I would say, and he's got Dale Jr.'s name on the vehicle. Like, this car has to make it. And I think that the Hendrick affiliation in the field, along with the Spire cars, they're going to help him as much as they possibly can to help him get into this race. Now, as far as Duel 2 is concerned, I think Alfredo is my favorite to make it out of that. I mean, those Beard cars can really, mount the run to, get to the finish and finish strong. And Alfredo in general, and I don't know if it's from his time with Front Row and Cup or what, but after that season, when you'd see him in Cup or Xfinity, he would have pretty strong runs on the restrictor plate tracks. So he'll definitely be somebody I'm watching as that race in Duel 2 progresses. But if there is a massive accident of some kind, I'm leaning closer to BJ McLeod. He knows how to take care of his car. He tends to stay out of the mess. I believe he made last year's race, if I'm not mistaken. He did get caught up in that crash in the second duel last year, but I think he was able to make it to the finish, if memory serves. But regardless, Alfredo is my favorite, but McLeod, if Alfredo gets swept out, would be the person I would opt with.
Yeah, I'm following with Allgaier in Duel number 1. That feels like pretty straightforward, pretty easy favorite. Duel 2, yeah, it gets a little bit more, interesting. But yeah, I think Anthony Alfredo, he would be my pick as well. We kind of talked about it already, but I think it's going to be him versus LaJoie. But I think, like you mentioned last year, Daytona in the fall, and just kind of that 62 as a whole. Can really show up at these races, and I think Alfredo will be able to make it in.
Alfredo, I think, has to be one of the folks that can make it in, especially that second duel, whereas in the first one, I see Justin Allgaier. The hard part is just the chaos of Daytona. We know how that could just wrong place, wrong time. You're in a crash, and next thing you know, it's game over, which that would be a heartbreak, I think, for especially Dale Jr. and everyone to see that occur. So everyone's going to be hoping to get in, but it's just so unpredictable once we get into these super speedways, who gets in, who gets out, and so on. With that said, now time for one of the hardest questions of the evening. Pick a winner. There is the leaderboard. We got a tie up out front. Matt White, Adam, they are tied for the leaderboard. We got 2 races, so in theory, one of us 3 could tie, get up there. Of course, if they get correct guesses, then it's still not the lead, but we got a shot on it. So, Jackson, starting with you, who's going to win Duel 1 and then Duel 2?
Duel number 1, I'm going with Kyle Busch. I don't know. I don't even know what to say. Like, I feel like he's been close to Daytona, and I'm trying to come up with reasons, and I can't like quite justify it. But I just feel like a duel situation is something where Kyle Busch could come through. He's been doing pretty good on the drafting tracks, and I think this is going to be an opportunity for him to get a win. I guess the situation would be, does this spark like a really great 2025 season for him, or is it kind of just like, oh, he won the duel? Like, was that it for the season? So I think Kyle Busch will win Duel number 1. And then I think, less of a justification needed to pick Joey Logano as my winner of Duel number 2.
Those are solid selections. I'm going to copy your first one because it fits my narrative from our preseason predictions that I think Kyle Busch is going to win this race, the big one. I think he's finally, after 20 years of trying and 20 years of frustration, going to win this race in an RCR car. And the exact way that Dale Earnhardt did it was winning his duel race. So I'm going to stick with Kyle as well there. As for Duel number 2, I think that one's a little less certain. I am leaning towards Blaney. I think that it'll probably be a battle between him and Todd Gilliland, if I had to take a guess. I think that Todd has shown a pretty strong inclination towards these kinds of tracks over the past couple of seasons, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him up there, but I think the 2023 Cup champion is going to assert himself very early this season by winning Duel number 2.
It's interesting predictions. Encourage everyone to chat room to comment with your predictions. For me, I think with Duel number 1, I'm going to go with Michael McDowell. I think he's going to put together a smart race, find his way towards the Inspire, the Chevrolets. I think there's going to be just a little bit of a shakeup on those final few laps. Not exactly a big one, but we've seen in the past some cars get a little loose sideways. One line seems to lose momentum, another line goes away. If he could put himself in the right spot, I think Michael McDowell will get it. And then for Duel 2, not copying y'all, but I think Ryan Blaney, the Ford camp, they're just going to be hard to beat. The only way I don't see one of those 3 Penske Fords winning this or RFK is if for some reason they're caught up in a crash, which Duel 2 tends to be a little bit more on the crazy side. But overall, I encourage everyone comment with their pick a winner picks for the duels, which of course are coming up. Still looks like the weather is holding off, so hopefully the race will start on time, and then we'll have racing. And of course, subscribe to us right here on the Grid Network, because Sunday, 12 noon Eastern, our pre-race show for the Daytona 500 will be on the air to preview the race. Now, we do know weather is in the forecast for Sunday, so hopefully that just changes, because the plan is after the race, the wrap-up show. But if there's weather, we'll post updates across social media, which you can find Grid Network TV on all these platforms. And of course, don't forget, April, the Grid Ranking, Grid Endurance Performance Index starts up, and pick a winner. Every Wednesday we post across social media, participate in that game. And of course, a big thank you to our Patreon investors for investing in the Grid Network each and every month. link in the video description to Patreon, and you can also do Buy Me a Coffee or YouTube Super Chat. Show your appreciation to our team members right here on the Grid Network. For Jackson and Tanner, I'm Joe. Thank you for watching today's show. We'll see you next time, and enjoy the races.